I have had my own experience. I've actually had two experiences where I've witnessed something in the sky that uh, that I can say I know that I was witnessing something that was not piloted by humans like we understand them. Let's put it that way. Now I can describe these because it doesn't take very long. My experiences were quite brief, but they were very profound, and they completely altered the direction that my life was going. They also, at least the first one, altered the course that I was on, and the second experience I had really solidified that. I was particularly drawn in this time to a group called the Pleiadians, who come from the Pleiadian star system or the star cluster. It's a cluster that's it's basically to the right of Orion. And if you look at it directly, it's kind of hard to see. But then if you unfocus your eyes, you can see that there's a cluster of about 7 stars there. Um, However, nowadays with the human eye, only 6 of them can be seen. And just to illustrate how old the connection of humanity is with that star cluster, we have myths that exist on every continent on Earth, talking about how there used to be 7 sisters, 7 Pleiadian sisters, and now there's only 6. One of them has gone into hiding. And so this is very interesting, of course, because they've done research on the Pleiadian star system, and it's a cluster. I mean, I keep getting this wrong, but 2 of the stars that were very close together have actually, from our perspective, now kind of come so close together that from our perspective, they can't be distinguished anymore as 2 separate stars, only when we view them through a telescope. The last time that we would have been able to see them as 2 separate stars would have been about 100,000 years ago.
Wow.
Which means that these stories from humanity that they once saw the 7 stars in that cluster must have their origin that long ago.
Yeah, because that's very interesting, because I went to Peru, and there was a gate that they made inside of the stone. It's called the Amuru, and it's close to like the Lake Titicaca, where there's a lot of UFO phenomenon as well. And they say that there's like a like a basement for these UFOs inside of Lake Titicaca. But there's this place there where I went to, and I took partake in this ceremony. And they have behind this gate, there's on the other side of the rock, there's a one rock laying on the ground, which is kind of like, they call it a mesa, which means table in Spanish. It's an offering stone, and there's like 7 dots on the stone, and they say that location is connected with the Pleiades. So what you're saying here, if they're so that old, that you could see that with 7 stars, then that means that this structure is more than 100,000 years old.
So they discovered this element that creates no waste, that can be weaponized. It's not bad for the environment. It's called thorium, and thorium can very easily be turned into a reactor, like we have for with uranium, but it doesn't have any of the downsides of uranium. It's literally green. And so thorium is also, it's a resource that is not, it's not rare. It's actually commonly available in the Earth's crust all across the Earth. So no matter where you live on planet Earth, you have access to this mineral. The thorium reactors, they exist as a salt in a stable condition, but they can be used to create this energy. And so thorium works, and it's been proven. Like if you Google it or get Wikipedia page, you say, oh, it's not proven. It is proven. Like they proved this with the Manhattan Project. They had like 3 different reactors running in the States. They were supplying energy to the grid. They were just shut down because, of course, this is dangerous type of information.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Common Underground podcast. I'm your host, Jasper Roodhuis, and today I'm joined by Tjeerd de Wit, my co-host. And today we're actually gonna talk about a very exciting subject. It's gonna be about UFOs and alien life forms. So in this episode, we're gonna provide a little bit of a foundation on like what draws us into the subject, and it's not gonna primarily focus. I think we're not primarily going into too much of the evidence because well, as a foundation, I think it's important to make some cases, but there are so many people that are already contributing a lot of content on YouTube and other means that are providing such a intriguing evidence that it's definitely worth looking into. And yeah, I'm gonna probably send a few of those in the description for people to check out and do substantial research into. But it's a very intriguing and vast topic. So like, Chair, maybe a question for you, like, is there some place you would like to start in this vast topic that most people don't even take serious, and what draws you into the subject as well?
Well, I mean, it's a really fascinating subject, and it can be rather difficult to find an entry point because it's so broad, and it's part of not just a cultural history but of a global history. When you think about how these stories have lived with us for a very long time, and how whether they are true or not, or true or symbolic, like we've had um, we've had these stories with us for a while. If I think about it, it's the Dogon, it's the Sumerians, it's the Egyptians. They all talked about having exchanges with beings from other star systems, and that carries some weight because we need to look into this. There's a lot of connections that exist across cultures when we're talking specifically about these witness events, basically of interactions. And so I would love to kind of speculate a little bit about what that could mean. But I know that we're living in a world today where the mindset globally is changing towards more open-mindedness, more acceptance of the topic in general. It was much more of a taboo, say in the 50s and the 60s, with the whole Soviet scare. People were very afraid of UFOs and didn't understand what they were because they might be the enemy from overseas. And right now, I think that we're looking at it in a completely different way. We realize that these things, if they're real, and I would argue that they are, that they operate in a way that is not within our understanding of physics. And that might be because the majority of us are kept in the dark about our actual advancements in science and physics, or this is just some knowledge that we don't have access to yet. When it comes to the inertial dampeners that these vehicles seems to have, which is like a Star Trek type technology, where they can make 90-degree turns whilst going at such neck-breaking speeds that any physical human body sitting in a vehicle going through those maneuvers would probably turn to mush or soup. So yeah, definitely fascinating and undeniable. We can no longer ignore these topics because they're becoming
but like yeah, well, I have some friends that like overall are very much skeptical towards it. Like it's becomes intriguing the more you know about it, but for most people, they don't have any experiences. Like myself, I don't have so much experience about this topic personally, but it's just fascinated me since I was a child. And it's always like there's so many people, well, it's not always, but there's so many times that I encounter people that were not interested in it, and they've never really taken it serious. But I think now, like you said, like there is this attitude change. Like people are hungry for it. Like there's a search for direction, and it's very natural that like people question, like, okay, there's people like more and more people coming out with some of these experiences. Like maybe you would like to share one of the that I know that you have, but I've met more people that told me these stories about what they encountered during even like under psychedelics experiences, but also when people are sober or getting in certain types of meditations or with dreams. Like that's the only close thing that I have with extraterrestrials with my own personal life, is that I had these very intense nightmares. I don't have nightmares often, but once I have nightmares, like there's like 8 out of 10 times that they're like nightmares, because like for me they're so intriguing. Like once I fully acknowledge that, you know, I have this affirmation there's something out there, that's gonna blow my mind. Like I have been blown by mind a lot of times, but that's gonna blow my mind for real. Like to have that affirmation. So I think like for most people they're in this stage of like looking for, you know, maybe they have one of these experiences or they encountered so many people don't have these experiences. They're like curious about like what can be found. And there's documents coming out. Why that's what I've been reading right now into the Blue Book documents, which are so fast. They're like 12,000 cases, and there's so much information, and a lot of it's not relevant. So they're discouraging in many different ways, but it's intriguing to see like these experiences, how they're like pushed aside as being a water balloon or some form of gases. But there's a lot of cases still left over. I think about 6% that actually shows that there's more going on. So
Absolutely.
that's
If you want to bury information, then the only way to do that is by burying it with more information. So it kind of makes sense that if Project Blue Book, this might not have been the intention of the actual researchers and the scientists involved, but maybe the purpose of this was to discredit the UFO phenomena. And so one way that I would think about doing that would be to kind of bury these real occurrences in a lot of false ones, so that it becomes difficult to tell apart the truth, like we're seeing with a lot of the internet dialogue nowadays. So this is kind of misinformation from the 60s and 50s, and very heavily tied to the Cold War, of course, that was going on as well. So no, it's of course a different climate nowadays, and so unidentified aircraft in the sky would mean something totally different to the 21st century human that you know, walks the street with us. However, we have up until now always had the idea that in general the world isn't quite ready for a full disclosure, for uh, a UFO landing on the White House lawn, or for maybe an alien embassy. Um, However, I think that change that needs to happen isn't happening gradually. It's happening very quickly. I feel like this is happening where we are getting ready for that. We're actually asking for it because humanity is maybe reaching a level of adulthood, and I'm speculating here, but um, part of becoming an adult is also realizing when you're in over your head and when you need to ask for help. And as a society globally, we want to stop hurting the planet that we live on. I think collectively we all want that. But if we feel like we don't have the means, like we are lacking the power, and so if there is ever a reason to ask for help from like some type of extraterrestrial interference or some type of guidance that is maybe kind of coming from a higher dimension, whatever, we have to maybe address our higher selves through meditation. Maybe these extraterrestrials are our higher selves. I don't know. It's all theoretical, of course, but we definitely could use some help in trying to change our ways, because we seem stuck in our own karma.
Yeah, it reminds me of what you said, like on Terence McKenna has this quote of like, we see them as visitors from extraterrestrial space, but they're actually like a projection of our own intuition. Like they're so alien to us that we think they're from another dimension, but they're actually our intuition misunderstood in some ways, and that's I think that's for me something I've been questioning a lot about. It's like, okay, when you look at this stuff of like seeing pictures of it or hearing these stories, there's like two takes you can make of this phenomena. One being they're like a metallic physical object that's just able to do things that like normal airplanes could not do, or any other flying objects that we know. But then the other is like it has like a multidimensional um, aspect to it as well. Like it could cloud itself, and it could just transport, like even like just pull it toward like to, I think we even with they have forms of that the telepathy. How do you say that? Like they like
Telepathic communication
yeah,
happening,
this
yeah,
as well.
without
But
them
like
leaving their vehicle.
yeah, quantum leap, I guess, and it's a bit like with using a portal or something like that. Like it's like in one moment that it's changing location. Um, that's also there's also some accounts in that. So
So if I can put in my 2 cents there, I think that these things that we're observing in the sky have probably mastered some type of dematerialization technology where they can choose to materialize or dematerialize their vehicles, and they are only visible when they choose to be, because the dematerialized state of their vehicle would offer them tremendous benefits, um, of course. And so it's not favorable for them to materialize their vehicles. And I think that only happens for certain reasons. And as you alluded to before, I have had my own experience. I've actually had 2 experiences where I've witnessed something in the sky that uh, that I can say I know that I was witnessing something that was not piloted by humans like we understand them. Let's put it that way. Now I can describe these because it doesn't take very long. My experiences were quite brief, but they were very profound, and they completely altered the direction that my life was going. They also, or at least the first one, altered the course that I was on, and the second experience I had really solidified that. And so at the time, I was living in the Caribbean, a little island called Saba. I was living at the house of a friend of mine. It's kind of like he was housing me. And there's generally something that precedes an experience like a UFO encounter that's deeply emotional, that is that goes ahead of an experience like this. For me, at that point, it was a sense of gratitude that was overwhelming. I was building up to a point where people in my environment were helping me. They were helping. They were being of service, and just counting my blessings and going through that. You know, you reach a level of gratitude. It's really overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can kind of imagine I'm looking out over the sea, and in the distance you can see some other Caribbean islands. They're kind of going away in the distance. I have the arc of islands. Next to Saba, you have St. Eustatius. Beyond that, Montserrat. They're all volcanoes. They get fainter in the distance, and there is an oil platform. It's located off of the St. Eustatia coast. And I can see the lights on there on the water. And so that's the scene that I'm looking at. It's very dark blue and very peaceful. Nothing is happening. And
is this during night, by the way?
Yeah, this is at night.
Okay.
So yeah, it's very quiet. I'm on a side of the island. I'm in between 2 ridges. There's no real homes for a while. So it's also very little light around me. It's a very clear sky. Nothing's happening, and suddenly something drops. Like you see a shooting star, for example. It'll like move laterally, diagonally. But this one, it was like something dropped from invisibility and became visible, and it dropped down, and then it altered course and it started kind of moving around, and it was kind of like hovering in the sky basically, and it immediately caught my attention. Like it was, I don't know, maybe I caught its attention as well, but I was observing this, but it was happening very far away. It was happening kilometers away from me, over the sea. Now, the first thing you try to do, of course, when you see a light in the sky that's doing something weird, you're like, is it blinking? No, it's not blinking. It's not a plane. And then it's like, okay, how is it maneuvering? Does this look like it's moving like a drone? Because drones already existed at that point in time, rudimentary drones, but whatever. And it wasn't behaving like that either, because it was actually covering a lot of distance in a very short amount of time. So it was incredibly fast. But it wasn't in the sky for long until suddenly a second light appeared in a very similar way. It came in a kind of an arc, and it joined it. And together they started performing a display of movement that can only be described as a dance to me. It was very profound. And it's difficult for me to talk about this without becoming very emotional, even, because it brings me back to that moment. It was like that moment was for me. And I was just in that time discovering a lot of stuff about humanity's awakening, connected to this end of the world prophecy for 2012, December 21st. The world was going to end because the Maya calendar supposedly stopped counting, beyond that.
So it's not true, but yeah.
No, it was an end of an age, perhaps. And
end of a cycle.
I feel like I have noticed that we changed and we moved into a new age. Now, if you're astrologically inclined, you would call this the age of Aquarius. You can call this, I think, a particular yuga as well. But we're kind of ramping up, and something is definitely changing. And I feel like this was very important moment in my life to have that experience. But after the experience, I was left confused. It was very overwhelming. And so, of course, after an experience like that, you're left with the thought, like, did I imagine this? Did I just want to see this? Like, I didn't expect that. I wasn't really, into this. But suddenly, and this might be described as synchronicities, like information started coming at me. And it would be different people would be mentioning things. Sometimes it might be a specific person that would come back to me with things. And I actually got into contact with the material, the raw material, that law of one channeling sessions around this time. Started reading that, and I also kind of started reading about different types of stories that people had, personal encounters. And a lot of these were scary stories, like you described, nightmares. And it was such a strong contrast to what I had experienced, which was a very loving experience, and very familial, like also almost like a reunion of sorts. So this definitely didn't sound like stories of being abducted or having like done sexual experimentation or like being like having my free will taken away. Nothing like this at all. And so I wanted to learn more. It's very intriguing, of course. And I think that by using my own discernment, by really judging the information that was coming at me through a very personal lens, like sorting things like, oh, this fits my worldview, this fits, like it's right, this feels right. And I don't question my logic. With that, I really question my heart, because my logic, it can sort information really easily, but then I'm left with all of this info, and I have to let my heart decide like what is true, because that's the way it works for me, at least. But I couldn't figure out what's going on with this alien stuff. Is this real? And did I have a real experience where I saw UFOs? Are those UFOs maybe secret military tech, and like reverse engineered like spacecraft that are used by a secret space program? I mean, you get into all kinds of stuff when you start researching this, and I'm like, oh my God, like what am I getting into? And so what I felt drawn to in this conversation that I found online were these benign or benevolent galactic races that have formed a federation that is actively trying to assist Earth, but is unable to directly intervene because of our free will and because of the purpose that we have here, and this being a very long-running experiment where we are not a species that they have found and that they are just observing, but something that they've actively meddled in and that they have become karmically involved with because of their meddling. And I felt very drawn to different types of material and started learning more about what had come forward in people that try to reach these entities through channeling. And I was particularly drawn in this time to a group called the Pleiadeans, who come from the Pleiadian star system, or the star cluster. It's a cluster that's it's basically to the right of Orion. And if you look at it directly, it's kind of hard to see. But then if you unfocus your eyes, you can see that there's a cluster of about 7 stars there. However, nowadays with the human eye, only 6 of them can be seen. And just to illustrate how old the connection of humanity is with that star cluster, we have myths that exist on every continent on Earth, talking about how there used to be 7 sisters, 7 Pleiadian sisters, and now there's only 6. One of them has gone into hiding. And so this is very interesting, of course, because they've done research on the Pleiadian star system, and it's a cluster, I keep getting this wrong, but 2 of the stars that were very close together have actually, from our perspective, now kind of come so close together that from our perspective, they can't be distinguished anymore as 2 separate stars, only when we view them through a telescope. The last time that we would have been able to see them as 2 separate stars would have been about 100,000 years ago.
Wow.
Which means that these stories from humanity that they once saw the 7 stars in that cluster must have their origin that long ago.
Yeah, because that's very interesting, because I went to Peru, and there was a gate that they made inside of the stone. It's called the Amuru, and it's close to like the Lake Titicaca, where there's a lot of UFO phenomenon as well. And they say that there's like a basement for these UFOs inside of Lake Titicaca. But there's this place there where I went to, and I took partake in this ceremony. And they have behind this gate, there's on the other side of the rock, there's a one rock laying on the ground, which is kind of like, they call it a mesa, which means table in Spanish. It's an offering stone. And there's like 7 dots on the stone, and say that location is connected with the Pleiades. So what you're saying here, if they're so that old that you could see that with 7 stars, then that means that this structure is more than 100,000 years old. That's very incredible. I would not, like, I knew that it was ancient, but that's a very long time ago. And so they have to reshape the whole of history to fit that into the story. And there was another story I would like to share as well, because I think I don't have anything with UFO like in personal experience, but actually there's this one where I've been to the Nazca lines, and they're in the Nazca lines, where, for people that don't know about the Nazca lines, these are these forms, we talked about it in previous podcast, but these are these lines and shapes and figures that you can see from the air. So there's already some inclination that it has to do with some extraterrestrial, but doesn't necessarily have to be. But there's a few anomalies in those Nazca lines, that some of these figures, they show an astronaut. There's one figure that's actually showing and that's the story that I could share, is that this alien figure, which hasn't been brought out it's something that's so controversial, just left it outside. But this person I was working together with on the Nazca Alliance, he showed me this video, and I could also put it into this video as well to show it to people. But you can see these 3 fingers on his hand, and there's like 3 toes, and you can see this whole alien body appearing. So like you mentioned, the
When you
Pleiades,
say alien body, can you describe the alien body? You mean
it's humanoid. It's very much a typical
enlarged cranium, or like a
yeah, very much typical ET gray, like an oval shaped head, and then there's these 3 fingers with like these round thingies on the finger, which like the fingers are a little bit on the outside, a little bit thicker. So it's very like strange like anatomy. But yeah, like I will put it in so people can't see. But
I mean, like if we want to talk about like the ancient references to these types of beings that are humanoid but not human for sure, you can look at the thousands of cave paintings that we can reference, and they're all over the world, where you see beings that seem to be wearing helmets and that maybe have different numbers of indexes, fingers, and that kind of stuff is really difficult to explain away. I mean, you're gonna start sounding silly. You just have to make these people seem really silly when you're trying to explain this. It's like, oh no, they were just, they were creative. They were just using their imagination. Like, I don't know what's going on there. Like, we have to look into that a little bit further.
Yeah, but often like these accounts, they show this typical, when there's a figure shown, it's often this typical AET, which led a lot of people to be pulled away by it, because they're like, this typical Hollywood type of alien figure, and so it's so strange how that's been taken in the film industry. But I don't think it necessarily
I don't
discredits
think
it.
it is strange. I think it's an archetype. It's a real, it's a real thing that seems to be living with us. Maybe it's just a symbol if it's not a real being, but it definitely is a part of us, because it was adapted by Hollywood and existed way before then.
Yeah, I heard Joe Rogan saying that because of birth, that people have this birth trauma, and because there's like these LED lights in the beginning. So he was very much looking for explanation that says that it was actually due to birth trauma and people having these in these their
You mean
dreams.
like these what do you call it, like the kidnapping experiences?
Yes, like the
People, while
abductions.
they're asleep, they feel like they're kidnapped. I mean, yeah, that's definitely interesting to consider. If these people are also filmed and they never leave their bed, but then they still account to having these experiences, and you're like, okay, well, I've had experiences in dreams where I definitely seem to have a body, and things are definitely, a little bit more than just my imagination. That's at least my perspective. And so, even if these things are happening in a dreamlike state or in a dreamlike world, is that not real? I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to make any statements on that, because it's very personal, and to kind of either to deny that could offend a lot of people. That for them these experiences are as real as it gets.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't get kidnapped. I didn't get probed, but I did need a confirmation, and so I did try to contact these aliens, because what I also read was that they are an advanced version of us. They are humanity evolved to a further degree, which allows them to also communicate without words. They can communicate with ideas and thought images and what we call telepathy. So I wanted to try that out, and of course, I was being facetious. I was almost trying to be kind of teasing them, like when I was being brought up uh, as a Christian. Whenever I would speak to God, it would be in spite. It would be like, oh, whatever, like you're listening, right? But this was different, because I had had that experience that I described before, but I needed the confirmation because I knew that this is, like you described earlier, if you have a confirmation like that, it blows your mind. But then you have to pick up the pieces and you have to keep moving through life, because you can't be like, you can't sit there stupefied with your mouth open. Like, you have to integrate that experience into your life. And I wanted to be sure that what I had seen was real. I needed a confirmation. And that's why I felt the need to start communicating. And so I started speaking to these entities in thought. Just, it's a Hail Mary. I'm trying this out. I want to see what happens, because I'm investing a lot of time into researching this topic, and it's completely changing everything I know about life, if this is true. So I need to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did was I reached out and I got myself into this real state of gratitude. Now I wasn't meditating. I didn't come across my people yet that kind of were able to break down meditation for me, but I was very fortunate. I had my own place on Seba. I had found my home, and my home was so beautiful, and I had this backyard and was looking out over the ocean and over a cliffside, and it was an evening, and it was still daytime. Sun was still above the horizon. It was starting to drop, and so you had this orange and yellow and red sky, this beautiful gradient. And through the gradient of those colors, you had these like feather-like clouds. And because had read this little booklet as a kid about clouds, I knew that those clouds exist at the highest altitudes, like 25 kilometers and up. And even though they seem to be still in the sky, they're actually moving at very high speeds, generally, like 100 kilometers an hour, or whatever. But it doesn't look like that to us because it's very far away. So I was just observing this scene. And at that point, I was sitting in this chair in my yard, and I had positioned it so that I had the prime spot of the view. And I just wanted to sit there and enjoy my free moment. And I was so grateful. And I was thinking about the topic. I was thinking about these Pleiadeans, these benevolent species that wanna assist us, but they're held back because they know that they could also harm us so easily if they were careless, and if they did anything wrong.
I wonder about that. That it's also due to the aliens of the reptilians. I mean, that seems to be coming up a lot as well. If you do a lot of research on like Anunnaki and all these stories, I've heard theories on that this is kind of like a cartoon planet, and that we're being like and that's, I guess, getting more to the conspiratorial side, is that there's this conspiracy, even like the government, if you look at those documents, like they seem to be knowing about it, and there's these people that claim and worked in high positions in government that say that they're working together with this alien race. Like this, I don't know if you ever heard that clip of the Area 51 former employee getting pulled off by the radio station, where he says that he works for in Area 51, and what they're doing there, they're working together, and this guy's like fully in panic. And it's a very interesting and very terrifying account. And I think, like what you said earlier as well, like some people have that nightmare about it because they see those. I think they're like you're describing malevolent, or I mean benevolent beings, but I think there's also like these malevolent creatures as well.
Yes,
So
I could get into that. I could get into that as well a little bit. And so I think that we started attracting a lot of attention as a planet when we started detonating nuclear bombs. A nuclear bomb, of course, depends on a chain reaction, creates an enormous explosion that is devastating, not just to our 3D dimension, but also has effects in the dimensions above and below. And according to this literature, there are entities inhabiting those other dimensions. And so when we detonate a nuclear bomb, that affects them as well. So it kind of created a situation where they had no need but to come and check us out, see what we're doing, because the we're kind of getting out of control here. And so there is evidence that um, aliens started intervening in our nuclear programs. They started shutting off missiles. They started sabotaging test detonations, all of that. And this is clearly documented also by Project Blue Book, and I believe that. But now we have these malevolent extraterrestrials, right? These other influences, and going back to the Anunnaki, going back to these creator gods, these supposed extraterrestrials that are maybe creating some type of worker race, human, for their own purposes. That's a different influence. And so if you look at the human project on planet Earth through the lens of this literature, multiple groups came together in this seeding of the Earth. And amongst those players in this big cosmic drama were the Pleiadeans, the Lyrians, the Syrians as well. And each had their own agendas. And yeah, the idea was to create an integrated society, but that wasn't necessarily what the Syrians wanted. There was a conflict because they wanted to create a polarized society, and that's kind of what exists through our mythology from that time. When we look at the ancient wars between the gods that took place, that is described in our ancient literature. We have the races of the Anunnaki and the brothers Enlil and Enki, that later on seem to be embodied in Egyptian mythology by Osiris and Seth. And Enki kind of seems to flee to South America and wants to start a benevolent society under the name of Quetzalcoatl, but then eventually ends up getting pushed out by another extraterrestrial war god again, which might be this brother Enlil that finds him, or some other entity. I feel like when you start looking at our global history through this lens of extraterrestrial interference, then these people, they are not actually outsiders. They are literally our ancestors.
Yeah, I've heard like these that it goes back to like even Atlantis and Lemuria, and that Atlantis was kind of like a Garden of Eden that we were trapped in, and eventually there were the people that got more of the technology, and then the Lemurians were people that rebelled of some sort of reason. It's been something that's not very fresh on my mind to speak
I think
on
that just when we're tapping into this subject, the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, they were never really told to be existed at the same time. Lemurians predate the Atlanteans and kind of lived in Southeast Asia, Pacific Ocean, and then the Atlantis period would happen afterwards. It's like another phase of evolution in the chronology that exists around this mythology. But we do hear about the Atlanteans trying their best. They have this very harmonized society, but something happens on the planet Mars, and they kind of ruin that planet over there. And so a group of very polarized, negative or masculine or whatever type of name you want to give this group comes as refugees to planet Earth, and they try to integrate, but they have this influence that makes the Atlanteans over a very long course of time kind of shift their course towards developing technologies that aren't benevolent, and it goes really wrong. Like that's the mythology surrounding all of that. I honestly, I don't know about that, but I do believe that the Atlanteans were real, and that they existed in North Africa. Most likely, that Rakat structure that has been found seems to really closely match the geographical description of Atlantis. When you look at the multiple rings, totally makes sense. Also, how it would have been completely wiped out by a massive flood or a natural catastrophe, because you can still see from space this massive washout that must have happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
The Atlantean Ocean washing over into the Sahara and then pulling out everything. You can see remnants of that from space. And it's linked to a meteor impact in Greenland about 11,600 years ago. So all of these things kind of match. But when we think about Atlantis, we just think about this very last bit of the Atlantean period, that's like 12,000 years ago, like the end of the Atlantis civilization.
Mm-hmm.
But there's probably like thousands and thousands and thousands, if not many more years before then of Atlantean evolution that seems to have been lost, if that was real. And I don't know what type of world we lived in back then. Maybe it was some type of alien embassy and everybody was walking the surface of the earth, or maybe I don't know. Oh, it's too far ago. Everything's washed out. We just have some very big blocks that are sticking out of the sand.
Yeah. No, that, like what I was also speaking on with Michael Tjeerd, that was the guy that spoke on that Atlantis is this Garden of Eden. It's I think my critique to all that, like I don't know if it's necessarily critique, but it's some concern. It's like all these stories and also what you're describing with Enki and the Egyptian gods. Like, sure, I'm willing to take into account that that this is the right interpretation or way to understand those myths, but there are so many layers to it. Like there are psychological reads that you can do out of those stories as well, and there's the spiritual, mythical, astrological. There's all these layers on top of layers. So it's possible. I don't know. I think it's very in what interests me mostly about all of this phenomena is like, so take for granted that it's true that there is extraterrestrial life. What are the implications of those? Like that's because of, as a philosopher, I'm very much interested in, okay, they're using telepathy, for example, or they're using other forms of technology. What are we doing on our planet? Like, I think it's interesting to look at like what the contrast is of different forms of transportation that they're using. Like, if that's true that they're here and they're having a similar kind of planet like ours, how did they regulate their resources? Like, what form of religion do they do? Do they have a religion, or are there like philosophers or shamans there, or is like everybody on the same page? These are like things that I found very interesting, because it's just merely for speculation, and also for like philosophical, it helps to philosophically inquire, because a lot of what we speak with humans about, it's very much like, what is their cultural background? If they're Christian or if they're atheist, they're informed in that way, so they will just utter that. So we get into this feedback loop. But once I could imagine myself philosophizing with an alien, like what do they give for answers about questions that we all have, so those are like things that I find very interesting. After you go on to like looking for evidence to support that there is some, and maybe discard if there's reason to. But I think, like you said, there's substantial amount of evidence and documentation that person can be drawn to. And also, if you have, especially if you have this experience yourself, you're willing to explore all the possibilities. What could it be? But I think like there are so many stages a person can be in this discovery of extraterrestrial, that there's so much, like we said in the beginning, there's so much to get out of it. But I think, and I feel in how we're using technology and how we're transporting, how we're communicating, there's so many things that we need to improve upon, and we need to involve and use, like, for example, more exacter ways of communicating. Why is there a interpretation required when we're speaking, for example? Like when you're telepathizing, it's just a picture upon picture, so there's no interpretation, there's nothing getting lost, there's no buffer or anything. So these are some things that, like, I've heard people like Jacob Fresco, I hope to talk about in a future episode. he is very much he's very critical against telepathy. He said he asked people to come if they claimed that they could use telepathy, and he never found anybody. But on the other side of so much people that do say so, it's very much depending on what type of experience you have and if you're
It's
willing
also
to go into it.
what are you going to go out to do? Like you're going to try and disprove telepathy. Of course, you're going to disprove telepathy. I feel like the only way for you to engage in telepathy with someone is to have that other one engage in telepathy with you. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to sit here and you can't read my mind. It's like, no, I can't. But I mean, if we get to know each other and if we get to understand each other and harmonize, then that's going to start happening automatically. And we're not even really going to talk about it because that's not uncommon for human interaction to communicate non-verbally in a wide range of ways. Now, we don't even necessarily always recognize when we are using telepathy, but I have so many experiences with my wife, with my friends, with family members, where communication has taken place without the use of words, and ideas are transferred. And this can happen with like literally with a look, but it doesn't need to, because we also have the quantum world where distance really doesn't matter. You don't have to be in the same room. You literally don't even have to be in the same country. We have twins, and one of them is on winter sports and breaks his leg, and the other one sitting at home and like he knows something went wrong horribly. Or a mom in America, she suddenly sits down and says like, something's not right, and her son is in a battlefield somewhere in Iraq, right? Like this is a real phenomena that so many people have personal experiences with. That distance doesn't matter, and we are all interconnected. If you start looking for proof of that, I promise you're going to find it. And that's the consistent message with all extraterrestrial engagements that I have looked into. The message is the same. It's a message of unity. And so when we're talking about the philosophy that they bring a philosophy of love and light, of unity, of knowledge. They say all of these things are the same thing, and it's all one. And we are going at it from a completely different angle, trying to break everything down into more separation. And it's literally the experiment that's going on here. It's a fracturing of the one. And so we're seeing that even polarization of the male and the female is happening to such a way that inside of the polarities, polarization is happening. So we get very masculine and very feminine women, and we get very masculine and very feminine men. We are reaching a point of subdivision and individuation that I feel is probably going to reach a climax, to which point we're going to go back to a unification. And if extraterrestrials are here to help us with one thing, it's that.
Yeah, but it's so once we're more individuated at the same time. Well, I think I think the individuation is becoming a more and more an individual. Like, is that what you mean with individuation?
Yeah, I mean it's very personal once again, but I think that we are kind of starting to recognize ourselves in each other more and more, starting to realize that anybody can become a refugee, for example, that anybody can become homeless. And so, and this is my hope, this is what I feel is happening. I feel like our judgment for each other is fading away because, we're all going through a lot. And we have so many debates raging right now, and we're really living in a world of separation. But we can only separate so far, and then we have to realize that there's only one thing left to do now, and that's to reunify. And I feel like a lot of us are reaching a point like, well, I feel like we're getting really separated from each other. We're becoming so separate that it's making individual souls be very unhappy. And we all kind of feel like, no, we want to kind of look for that closeness and that connection. That's the reason why we're getting more podcasts now, more conversations, more sharing of ideas, more more interaction, like you are, for example, breaking down borders between different cultures, having conversations with people from all over the world, from different religions. I think it's a sign of the times.
Yeah, it's to give a little bit of like philosophical supplementation there. There's this guy Empedocles, who said that there's different stages. There's actually 4 stages that creation goes into, and he says the first stage is where love is superior. So this is the stage of love. So this is where unity exists, and then there's this advance of strife, which there's this friction occurring. There's the first elements that are moving freely, and then there's the third stage where strife is ruling, and so all the elements, they are all categorized perfectly together. But then the advancement of love begins, and so they mingle back together again, and so it's like a cycle that keeps continuing. So I think with these, and I feel like the extraterrestrials are in that stage of reaching that unity awareness of, okay, there's, I've even encountered in synchronicities as well, people saying, like, especially in the Inca culture, they're aware of this, that how all these elements, they need each other in order to exist. So there's this completion when we're taking all these elements into account and we mingle them together into a story, and then we realize that we're connected with all these elements and with each other, and with well, we're all like form of elemental beings in some ways, like kind of like personality types as well. But that's another story. But in what I found fascinating about what you said about telepathy, I've heard that the UFOs are also being monitored through mental projection as well, that they don't have controls like we have with like a keyboard and a mouse, but they actually control with their mental capacity.
As
So they
if the
seem to
ship
be
is an
nurtured.
extension of their mind. Is that what
Yes,
you kind of
yes, exactly. Like you're using a sword to be an extension of yourself. They seem to bring, like in our society, we see, like you said, when you separate, we do that with nature, we do that with technology. So we see nature as something chaotic that could, at any moment, there could be an earthquake erupting, and then people saying in a paper or saying like it's violent. And then there's people saying, even more in the spiritual community, saying technology is something that could harm us, could destroy us. And there are valid points in there. But it's ultimately something that's also part of ourselves. So what I think is very interesting about the cases of these UFO phenomenon is that there's some type of way that technology isn't a threat for their civilization. And I think we're also moving into that direction as well. And I'm hoping to contribute in that way. And like Jacob Frasco, that's an inventor that also, and Victor Schauberger, Nikola Tesla, these are all giants that were giving us pieces to move forward in that direction, that we don't need to use fossil fuels and things that are now coming up with these climate change things. But there is a renewable source of energy that isn't a windmill or a sun reflector or whatever. All those things are great, but there's a lot more. And
They're actually not great. That's
no,
something that's a sad reality of the world we live in. So we have like a big group meeting going on from different countries all over the world, trying to save the climate, because we have to move to renewable energy sources. We're going to save the world with solar and wind energy. Well, I haven't heard that like a big load of bull like that in a long time, because we have no idea how to utilize these technologies. We just have the technology to create solar panels, but we don't know how to recycle them. So those things, they exist for 25 years, and after 25 years, they end up in landfill. So what's happening now? Those things are leaking the selenium into the soil, and it's going into the groundwater. It's affecting our agricultural soil as well. We have so much carbon that goes into producing these types of windmills. Like think about like a big like wing from one of those windmills, how much carbon fuel they have to burn just to get the resources for that and to create one of those. These things, they're only green while they are operating. So when the windmill is spinning, it's green. And when the solar panel is underneath the sun on a sunny day, it's green. But while these things are being produced, they're very bad for the environment. And after they are done being used, they're also very bad for the environment. They take up all types of metal and concrete, and these things like the selenium, for example, are the rare earth minerals that mostly come from China. And you have these minerals. Some of them come from like Burundi or the Manica, the Congo. The binding for cobalt, all of these things that go into the lithium batteries for our electric future. My goodness, man, they're literally sending children into mines, and that's gonna save the planet? No, 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 no. We need something completely different. So we know that there is an almost infinite amount of energy in like a sugar cube of just space, in the quantum energy. We know that this exists. It's difficult to harness this power, but it's possible. It's within our capabilities. We're just not focused on doing that. And then we also, of course, right now I saw this interesting lecture yesterday by Greg Braden. He's really an amazing guy. And he was talking about the Manhattan Project and how they went through all the elements on the periodic table trying to make the nuclear bomb. And so they discovered this element that creates no waste, that can be weaponized. It's not bad for the environment. It's called thorium, and thorium can very easily be turned into a reactor, like we have for with uranium, but it doesn't have any of the downsides of uranium. It's literally green. And so thorium is also, it's a resource that is not, it's not rare. It's actually commonly available in the Earth's crust all across the Earth. So no matter where you live on planet Earth, you have access to this mineral. The thorium reactors, they exist as a salt in a stable condition, but they can be used to create this energy. And so thorium works, and it's been proven. Like if you Google it or get Wikipedia page and say, oh, it's not proven. It is proven. Like they proved this with the Manhattan Project. They had like 3 different reactors running in the States. They were supplying energy to the grid. They were just shut down because, of course, this is dangerous type of information. So yeah, we need a bridge to the quantum energy. We're not there yet, I guess, right now, but we definitely can't keep burning coal. Like they just opened another coal mine in England. Like, what are they thinking? And we also can't fool ourselves thinking that solar energy and wind energy and like supplemental geothermal energy is going to save the Earth, because it's not. It's actually damaging the Earth.
Yeah, it definitely is. I know with the windmills that there's birds dying of it. I've heard about what you said with the solar panels. It's sad on some side, because if you do more research on like zero point energy and like the Hutchinson effect and von Graaf machine, there's things to be found, but I found it so much more helpful if we could have a way that how can we build one. I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I want to build an experiment, or I want to do something, and we all want to do something about this thing that's happening, and there's things that we can do, but it's made us almost impossible. Like once you get one of these things done, like you cannot really market it. You have to be very careful, because there are people in power that they don't want you to provide people with these capabilities. And so in some sense we're not ready yet. I don't think I do hope that people are participating in this, because everyone can decide if they're ready or not. But in previous stages before, we were in the situation where once it was, I've heard like Spanish car inventor inventing a car that is based on water, that could use a glass of water and it could drive like 300 kilometers. His whole lab got burned down, like these types. And then the thing with Nikola Tesla, and yeah, it's really sad. Like we can have that if we really wanted to.
Think about it, like all of these technologies, they still exist. They're just suppressed. All of that information, all of that documentation, all the proof, it's in some box somewhere and in some type of ABC agencies, top secret facility. And I think that this knowledge is just waiting to come out. And I am looking forward to the day where we suddenly have like 6,000 of these kinds of suppressed inventions that are going to solve the problems of clean water and access to food and access to power for everyone. Think about it. Why do people have such problems building proper houses for themselves in some countries? Because they don't have access to power tools as well. Like power is a big thing. And we also, we really need to have a conversation about how we're going to build sustainable housing, because our bodies need houses, but we can't keep building houses like we are right now as well. Like we need some help, I think. And if you do believe that you can contact people that don't live on planet Earth or that live deep in the Earth's crust, for example, then yeah, I think that meditation would be the way to reach them. If they are telepathically inclined, they'll probably pick up on your signal if you send a clear enough one. There's actually something happening on the 21st of December again. It's an interesting moment, of course, but it's the winter solstice, and there is an event happening where around the world people are globally meditating, but they're meditating all at once, and they're doing a guided meditation. It's very, very open to interpretation, but it's basically an invocation or an invitation to extraterrestrials. Because we'd be very surprised if they show up at the party, but it's basically us sending a signal, a unified signal, saying like, hey, I think we wouldn't mind some help here. And I've always been against this because I feel like, no, it's our personal development, and I want to personally develop my soul. I don't want to have any extraterrestrial intervention because that means I give up on my mission. That's not it anymore. It's gotten bigger than us. We're harming Gaia. We're harming our planet Earth. And for me, that's reason enough to ask for some help, because we don't seem to be willing to collectively cooperate on fixing that issue. And I don't want to see our planet suffer anymore.
No, definitely. Like like Michael Krupp is one of my big teachers, and he always teaches me like one of the most important lessons is compassion. So he's very like all the things that he can do with psychokinesis and things that most people will discard. He says it's only possible due to building a relationship. So actually expanding your consciousness by empathizing into an object or into whatever you're communicating with. And he said that his primary teachers were one, nature itself, and extraterrestrial beings. So that supports what you're saying, in that they actually are here to teach first. I think initially some people that are ready to receive them, so they've done it like, sneaking in the background with the people that are open to this. And I think I know that from my own experience, like when I was in South America and Peru, people are a lot more open to it than here, like say in the Netherlands. So I'm always fascinated what comes out of these experiments with mass meditation, and maybe there will be something happening. But I know for people that also want to do something more like on their own timing, CE5 meditation is another option that people can do, and I've never done it, so I'm also like hope that there will be some spot that maybe tonight, I don't know, if the weather is not too cold and the weather is like it's not clouded, then maybe I'll do it tonight. I'll see, I don't know. But I do want to do it one time, and I'm hoping that people that are watching and listening, well, it's their own choice, of course, so I'm not forcing anybody on that. But if you're ready for that type of experience, then this might be something worth trying. And if you have any encounter, like, please let us know, because we're fascinating about this subject. And I think there's so much like we didn't even talk about that is also like something we should have mentioned, like
absolutely. If I can give any advice there, I've heard about the C5 protocol. I believe that it's very effective also in groups and in kind of invoking a UFO appearance. But I would say don't overthink it. Like, of course, if you go through a type of ritual meditation, it's going to enhance your own belief because you're investing more energy into it. And it will, of course, help with the effects that you're, maybe it'll help towards actually creating an experience like that. But I think it's about the authenticity of the emotion. And keep in mind that the second experience that I started to describe, where I was sitting in my yard and it was a beautiful evening, I had some thoughts that happened in a row where I was very grateful. First of all, for all the things in my life that are to be grateful for. But then there's also the aspect of being grateful for them, for their presence. And for me, that was a big thing, like trying to kind of show that, hey, wait a second, I am actually here right now, and they are probably here as well. Let me just start talking to them for a second. And so when I did that, and first of all, I thanked them. I was like, thank you for being here. You know, if you are here, I love you. I love you for being here and for coming to assist. It means a lot. And I am looking for some confirmation personally. Like, it's really like, it changes everything for me. And I want to help you guys with your mission as well. But I need some proof. And I'm like, that's just how I'm inclined, my soul, my intellect. I need some confirmation. I've seen something that I can't explain, but if you could just prove to me that what I saw was real, then that would be enough. Then I would never ask for anything again. Then I would be whole. Then I don't need to meet you guys. You don't have to invest any energy in materializing bodies in front of me. Like, if I could just see some proof right now, that I'm done. And then I can move on with my life without and not question this, because it takes a lot of energy when you question that idea, and that it takes up so much of your mind space. And I want to you know, be able to put the subject past me, or really embrace it. And at that moment, I had my second UFO encounter, and it was in broad daylight. But a similar thing happened, where a vehicle that appeared like a very bright star, you know, like an orb of light, it dropped out of the outer atmosphere into the lower atmosphere. And I could see it. It was coming through into those clouds that I described, the feather-like clouds very high up in the sky. And it started moving across the sky. So it arced and it started traveling towards kind of the sun. And as soon as I took notice of it and I understood what was going on, and that it was there really for me, then it shut off, like, and that's the same way that the other two that I saw in my first experience, I think this was a few weeks earlier, how they disappeared. The acceleration is mind-boggling. When you see something like that with your own eyes, then you don't really need to see any type of proof on your laptop or your phone screen. Like, you've literally seen something accelerate like that. Like, so no, big sigh of relief. Like, for me, it's done. Like, I don't have to wonder anymore. Now I can just kind of sort through all this information that is available to us on the internet and use my own heart to decide what of it is true and what is not. So I would invite everybody else to kind of start a dialogue and see if anything speaks back to you, because I mean, it might be your own imagination, but everything is.
Yeah, we're living in God's imagination for sure. Yeah, I think that's great to end it off. I'm gonna leave it the CI meditation in the description, so people are, if they're open, there's a set of instructions that a person can do to do it well, and it also says like some disclaimers in there as well, so it's very much safety first and those types of things. Yeah, is there something else you want to add to our conversation
Yeah, there's one final thing, Jasper. If anybody feels guided to join this global meditation happening on the 21st of December, I'll also share a link with you where people will be able to find some information. Maybe you can add that to the description.
Yeah.
These events, they don't happen very often, but I mean, how often do you get the chance to meditate with hundreds and thousands of people all across the world at the same time? I would read a little bit about it and see if you want to join.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm gonna see. I'm hoping to be available, but it's something I would love to try out. I've never done a group meditation besides Socrates, so it's gonna be something a new experiment. So I hope people found this meaningful. So if people have some type of experiences relating to extraterrestrials or UFOs or anything like that, then be sure to like it into this if the comments, if they are open to share that. We love to read about those as well. And like and subscribe and be posted for our next episode. Thank you, Tjeerd, for being here tonight.
Absolutely, and love and light.
All right, peace. Bye bye.